prayers. Send your Spirit to strengthen us with his gifts. Come, Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. I don't have any announcements. Does anyone else on council have any announcements or praise? No? How about anyone from the public or staff? Any announcements or praise? All right. Guess we'll just get moving. Up next, we have the non-agenda matters section. This is when we invite the public to come forward with any items that may not be on the agenda. If anyone does have something that's not on the agenda, if you could come forward and please state your name and whether or not you are a resident of Sturgis. If you could please keep your comments respectful and to 3 minutes or less. Does anyone from the public have any non-agenda matters? Not hearing any. Anyone from council happen to have any non-agenda? Okay, moving right along today. Up next, we have the mayor's report. And I believe we got Lisa with some payroll.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I have a couple of ambulance employees who are part-time that have gone and changed their certification level. They have moved from a non-EMT to an EMT, and then one has moved from an EMT basic to an EMT advanced. I also have 2 payroll changes for the rally. These are just temporary employees that will be working at our info booth and being event staffers for us during the rally.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Anyone have any questions? All right, thank you. All right, and then that brings us to scheduled executive session. We do have a need for this for a number of items. We are expecting to just be in executive session for 30 minutes. So we're going to have a cap on it. So if anyone wants to wait outside, you can absolutely do so. So 30 minutes. Is there a motion to go into exec?
I'll make that motion.
That's a first by Jim
Second.
and a second by Kevin to go into exec. All those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Yes. Those opposed with a no. Okay, we will start Okay, back in regular session at 7:25 PM. That brings us to some of the items that were tabled from our July 15th meeting. Chunk of those being some of our sponsorship agreements. So that'll bring us right down to item 9.1, which is consideration to approve the co-SMR licensing agreement with AMA Pro Racing. Is there a motion on item 9.1?
I would move to approve 9.1.
That's a first, second by Jim to approve item 9.1. Any discussion? Not that much can be discussed. Okay, all those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed with a no? Okay, 9.1 passes. Down to item 9.2. This is a sponsorship agreement with Anheuser-Busch. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I'd move to approve.
That is a first by Kevin
I'll second it.
and a second by Tony to approve that. Any discussion that can be discussed? All those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed with a no? Okay, that one passes. On to item 9.3. And this is a marketing agreement with AMA Pro for the race. Is there a motion on item 9.3?
I move to approve.
That is a first by Jim to approve that marketing agreement with AMA Pro.
Madam Mayor, that agreement is not in form to be signed.
Okay. Information from our attorney that that agreement is not in a condition to be signed yet. Jim, you made a motion.
Well, I guess
Did
that
you-
would make that, we'd have to back off of that one if that's the issue.
With knowing that that one is not in form to be signed, would there be a motion maybe to move it to a different meeting, or I guess
I'd
let's
make a
table
motion
it?
to move it to the 29th.
Okay,
Is that the 29th?
sure.
I'd second that.
Okay, so that is a first by Jesse to move that marketing agreement, the signing of that to July 29th, and a second by Nick, sorry. All right,
Do we have
Any
to have-
questions
Do we have to
or-
have Jim pull his?
there was no second
Okay,
yet, so,
okay. Thank you.
sure thing. All right, okay. All those in favor of moving that 9.3 to the July 29th meeting, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed with a no? Okay, that will be moved to July 29th for consideration. Down to item 9.4. This one is consideration of a lease agreement with Dixon.
Mayor,
Yes.
would you consider a bulk motion for 9.4 through 9.11?
I sure would. I just know that there were some that might have had some issues, so I figured I'd go separately, but if there,
I don't think we had any that had any issues in there. I mean, I would make, if you would take the motion, I would make a motion of 9.4 to 9.11 be approved.
okay, so there was a motion by Kevin to approve items 9.4 through
Question,
9.11. Yes, Mike.
Mr. Marshall, can we do that when we're spending money?
May I, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I don't believe that in most of these agreements, we are spending money. In most of these agreements, we are entering into a quid pro quo, as was so popular recently, where we are extending rally sponsorship benefits in return for money, not spending city money. So yes, I believe it is appropriate if council so desires to take these as one.
With that, I'd second Kevin's motion.
I did not hear a second for Kevin's motion.
I
Oh,
just-
you
I
did?
would
Oh,
yes,
okay. Thanks, Tony.
yes.
All right, so that was a first by Kevin and a second by Tony to approve all the agreements, items 9.4 through 9.11. All those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed with a no? Okay, items 9.4 through 9.11 are approved. And that will bring us down to the consent agenda. Here we have item 10.1, and this is just to set a public hearing, which would be to discuss repealing an ordinance that we have in place. And Mr. Marshall, do you have some information on that? If anyone has a question, I guess. Did anyone want that pulled from the, sorry, did anyone want that pulled from the consent agenda for discussion? Anyone from the public want it pulled from the consent agenda for discussion? Okay, I guess we don't need to discuss that. So that is just setting that public hearing. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
That is a first by Ruth
Second.
and a second by Dawn to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed with a no. Okay, consent agenda is passed. Down to reports. Item 11.1 is consideration to approve a professional services agreement with Colliers Securities. Is there any questions, comments, any discussion, or motion?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I would like to possibly have this tabled so we can get some more information on possibly what we're gonna do with this,
If it's needed or not,
Yes.
type of thing. Okay.
if we can do that. I don't know I'm looking for suggestions on how long we should table it. I don't know what is that, Mark? Is
would-
it the next meeting, or can we?
Yeah, automatically it would pop up at the next meeting unless you put a date on it.
May I,
So yes.
Madam
please.
Mayor?
Yes.
Madam Mayor was correct.
Okay.
Unless you specify to a date certain, it would come up at your next meeting. And I don't believe you would have the information that you desire in time to have it considered on
The
July
29th.
29th.
Then August 19th would be our next meeting after the 29th.
Then we have that thing called rally, so.
Well, that's why, so our next meeting isn't until, I don't know how much information you'll be getting during rally.
In September, that's,
The first meeting of September, oh,
I believe in the first one, would be our first one in September then.
well,
19.
September 2nd, September 3rd.
do we have a meeting on September 3rd? Probably, yeah. It's a Tuesday after Labor Day. Labor Day's on a Monday.
Well, with the time constraints with rally and whatnot, I would table it till September 3rd, and then we can get the information that we're looking for.
Okay. So that was a motion by Tony to table this until the September 3rd meeting.
I'll second.
And that's a second by Jesse. Since that was tabled, there won't be any discussion. All those in favor of tabling this item until September 3rd, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed with a no. Okay, that item is tabled. That brings us down to item 11.2. This is consideration of approving the first reading of ordinance 2024-06, which would be amending and restating Title 7. And then also a first reading of ordinance 2024-07 to amend and restate Title parts of that. Does anyone have any questions or concerns of what was put out there with the revisions for this first reading? I know Eric was working pretty hard on this. Mark was out with surgery and still worked on some when he got back. Other staff put in as well.
Yeah.
Got any questions, Kevin?
Well, I have some comments to, I guess, go. First is, great job. We made a lot more headway than we have for the last few meetings on this. But we still have some gaps, and I'm not quite sure how we want to attack this. If we want to go through the document one chapter at a time. I mean, that's what we've been doing.
Do you have a lot of things you'd like to see changed, or?
There's questions, and definitely some are changes. I don't know, does any other counselors have any questions?
Yeah.
Ruth, you do?
Well, then, yeah, we can go through it systematically then, so we don't miss anything and don't have to keep going forward and backwards, so. We'll start in Title I, or, sorry, with the Title I, Chapter 1. Any questions, comments here? How about in any of the Title I stuff? Of the changes there? 7? Okay. Yep, no one had anything, no one up on council had any questions or comments or things to change for Title I. So I'll move on to Title 7 right now. What do we have there to start?
Well, Mayor, for myself, we go all the way to 7.1.8, appointment of council members to boards and committees. On the first reading ordinance, we've got 12 committees. Forestry Board and Parks Board, 3 and 5, have been combined for years. The Infrastructure Advisory Committee is not listed on this, so that item is missing. And the appointment procedure for Legal and Finance does not follow what has been our custom and culture of the council president and vice president being members of the Legal and Finance Committee subcommittee, and one at-large counselor being a member of that as well.
Well, I can speak to the infrastructure part. That was not one that was mentioned that should have been added. At the last meeting, it was mentioned to add legal and finance and rallying events, and so that's what staff did. So if if you're asking for infrastructure now, then that can certainly be added, but I can just speak to why that was not on there.
Well, that was one that was in our previous Title VII, or, you know, we had a infrastructure committee, and that's how we developed our capital expenditure plan.
So what exactly are you, what page are you looking at? Just so I can,
Well, it's hard to do a page. I guess I printed this off of the agenda item, page 66 of 85.
that's perfect.
item 718.
Okay, and so then so we talked about infrastructure was just not on there because it wasn't requested to be, so, but it certainly can be. And then how
Forest-
would you like, oh, sorry.
Forestry and parks have been combined in operation now for years.
So you just like to see it forestry/parks or parks/forestry?
I don't know, Rick, do you have input on that?
So it's all the same people? Okay.
Parks Board.
Mhm.
So drop forestry.
Okay. Listed. Sure.
And we do have the MUB, but it looks like it's listed in 718. Just before. Did I write that down wrong? That's the same one that we're in.
It's the one above it, 7. 1 7.
So if there's nothing that needs to be done on the MUB, then that looks, I'm okay with that. In chapter 719, I received a public comment from a constituent that brought up the private ballot in 719, the election of president and vice president. I bring that only up as discussion.
Was this the only place that appeared, or was this also in our policy and procedure as far as the private ballot?
May I, Mayor?
Yes.
My recollection is that in the current city documents, there is a reference to by ballot. Ballot, by definition, is a private ballot. That appeared in ordinance. I do not recall the provision, if any, in policy.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I know, Kevin, you just said it was a question by someone, but how does council feel about that? Is that something council wants? I don't know what you're supposed to do with that question.
Well, I'm presenting it, I guess.
My opinion on that, and given the choice, is I believe that all of those should be public. I believe the public expects that information, and I think that as council members from Ward 3, for example, if we're voting for something, I think that should be done. It should be known what we're doing.
I'm all for removing the word private. I do not care one way or the other, but I agree with your point.
Or according, I guess, to what Mr. Marshall just said, would we have to remove the word ballot as well? Because ballot would imply that a ballot is something that's
May I
private.
suggest language? Instead of private ballot, may we substitute public vote?
Good.
Yeah. I'd be okay with that.
Great. In chapter 7.2, city officials, 721 B2, we talked about term matching, potentially the appointments of officials matching the mayor's term. We still have in this agreement for an indefinite term of office, or until a successor is appointed and qualified.
So what are you suggesting, I guess?
Well, I would suggest that we amend that to match the mayor's term. That's what previous discussion by the council had indicated. But we still have this lingering piece of indefinite term.
The reason, if I may, Madam Mayor, is for the benefit of staff. If they are doing their job satisfactorily, the need for reappointment and reapproval can be seen as burdensome and can be seen as a detriment to the ability to hire qualified people to fill that office. That is why for an indefinite term appears in state statute with regard to a city manager.
Thank you. This is first reading, so any changes, if anyone else on council either agrees or disagrees with any changes, we'll want to hear that.
We've talked about some changes already. And I guess honestly, we don't have a motion, so we really are struggling with discussion even as well. But is the public able to comment right now?
Yeah, they will. I was just gonna try to hear what council had to say so that once we opened it up to the public, they would kind of know what we were working with in general, but we could certain, I mean,
I
would
just-
that help right now if
Um,
got any public input?
Madam Mayor, I
Yes.
would have a comment. And this is, under this one, the same 70201, this is where it says that the mayor has the right to fire, and I think this is a place we can put in giving council approval, I think is something that I would be much more comfortable with. And again, that's not a personal issue. It has to do with future councils as well. So that's an opinion. I'm not sure how, if we want to make that a motion or how that's to work.
Where are you, what letter are you under? You're at
B2.
702.
0201B, B2.
Oh, the same. Okay.
So I would suggest that we, the part where the mayor is allowed to fire, but with the council approval.
Is that the right section, Jude, that I have highlighted?
I have notes, not my, yeah,
Yeah, that's the right one.
yeah. Thank you.
May I comment on that, Madam Mayor?
Yes, please.
The ability for the presiding office in the aldermanic form of government to fire is given by state law. I don't believe that the city council can condition that on council approval, as it is preempted by state law. Not expressing an opinion one way or the other, but simply saying that is a possible impediment.
Thank you. Well, we can circle back around to that one. If we're not having any other input, we'll just underline this and circle back.
Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
The first part of that says the mayor appoints each officer with the approval of the city council, so then the mayor can terminate an officer without the approval of the city council?
That is
That's the way the
correct
statute
by-
reads?
By state law, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I still wonder about the indefinite term piece. I understand how there's a comfort level, but if there's 100% performance and everything's good, it's a matter of procedure.
I mean, I can see both sides of that being just
Just for-
procedure or it hindering someone even
Just
wanting
for
to apply.
discussion, Kevin, and maybe I'm not reading that right, but it goes on to say, they can be fired by the mayor with or without cause at any time. Does that, I know it says indefinite term, but then the mayor can also fire with or without cause? I'm just trying to understand your reluctance with that.
State law says the mayor makes effects, right, to employees. Contracts are approved by council. Definitely long-term to future councils, and it doesn't seem reasonable to me to do that. It seems reasonable to allow the legislative body the chance to review that, at least at the time that the mayor changes position. Holding the seat changes.
So it's more, your reluctance is tied in with the contract, not necessarily the,
So I'm
Yeah,
thinking
I
if there's a
understand.
contract would have all those terms in it. So, Mr. Marshall, or would we be talking about employees that don't have a contract then? Because if they do have a contract, I would think the contract wouldn't say indefinite.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The contract will provide all of the other terms of employment, and that is pay, job duties, hours, all of those things. However, the contract itself cannot supersede the mayor's ability to discharge an employee with or without cause. That is a right granted to the mayor in the aldermanic form of government by state law. Typically, that is addressed by having severance packages for the circumstances where they are discharged in the middle of a term. So there are a couple of different issues at play. So the contract does not affect how long a person occupies the position.
So the contract's not going to say they have their job indefinitely.
No.
I have commentary on that as well. I also see the argument for the indefinite wording in there, but also see Kevin's point as well. And if you could help me understand something when it comes to state law too, because my interpretation of 914.3 with appointment of officers says that the mayor, with the approval of city council, will appoint the officers. It says annually or at intervals determined by the governing body. So my interpretation of that is that the mayor gets to appoint officers with the consent of council, but we get to determine how often that occurs. Is that right?
It can be read that way.
Okay. So with that, would that mean that we can decide, like to Kevin's suggestion, if he said that every time there was a new term for a mayor, then the officers get appointed and council gets to approve those appointments again, or not? Is that correct?
You certainly may do that.
Okay. So I would be inclined to have it written so that with every new term with mayor, that we appoint or reappoint with the consent of council, so then council gets to have some input into the appointment each time a new mayor comes on board or is reelected.
May I pose a devil's advocate question?
Of course.
Mayor Karstensen served for 12 years. Under example, would that reappointment occur every time an incumbent is reelected?
And I think that would be open for discussion with the rest of council too. Since we get to my interpretation is we get to determine the intervals at which that would occur. So,
It should be that the term, Angela
So
runs it.
regardless
If you
of
were on
who it
again in
was.
May, and if the next term, at that point, it's the same thing, and that 3 years later, the same thing.
So regardless of who the person is.
Regardless of the person, it has to do with the term.
So under your version, council could remove the mayor's choice who had been previously approved and who is recommended again for any reason that the council chooses, which seems to be contrary to the intent that the power to fire is vested in the mayor.
council wouldn't be removing. It would just be the mayor appointing or reappointing with the consent of council.
But council would have the effective power to fire by not approving.
Correct.
And if that's what you want, I don't have any difficulty. I think it should be stated for the benefit of employees to understand the nature of their employment.
So, yeah, there's still those couple of issues in that section 2.
Well, the first sentence is state law. I think it would be coming at at any time, so with or without at any time. And so for when it starts with for an indefinite term of office. And anyone else feel free to jump in here too. Such officers must be appointed with each new term, mayoral term. Is that right? Help me with my words,
Appointed
please.
or reappointed.
Yes, appointed or reappointed.
With council approval. Or
Should it be reaffirmed by council? First approval?
Well, it seems contradictory, yeah.
The health of that sentence if that termination condition was removed.
Would you please come to a microphone, Bonnie?
I think I had permission. It would improve the health of that sentence. Am I okay? Yep. If that condition, their appointment may be terminated by the mayor with or without cause at any time, were removed from the middle of that sentence, and you got the clear statement out there. Appointed officers serve at the pleasure of the mayor for an indefinite term of office or until a successor is appointed and qualified. That sentence holds together. Then come back in with your condition of termination, and you have a much healthier statement.
Were we trying to get rid of the indefinite, though?
Did that make sense?
To Kevin's point, you wanted to get rid of that indefinite term, right?
I was hoping to.
Yeah, I mean, That's okay. I was just working with what was there, is that the problem is that you've parked something in the middle of that sentence that just takes you off to the southeast, and then you've got to come back again. It just makes sense to take that piece out of the middle and work with one sentence and then the other.
Well, I think with the number of changes being made, if this first reading were to pass today, it would probably just be with the changes, and then the document would have to be rewritten well.
Would you please save those?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'm not sure that me, for one, I'm not sure I want to get into the firing aspect of department heads. And if you're going to replace a department head, how many department heads do you think are going to stay on a switch from a mayor every 3 years? Their jobs are insecure as it is. Why would they even consider coming?
And I think that goes to the point that Mr. Marshall
Yes,
made.
I agree. I think an indefinite term, the way it was written originally, allows for that person to stay as long as they work with the mayor. If the mayor decides to let them go, nothing we can do about it. And I, for one, don't want to be involved in the termination of people or voting on a termination of somebody. That's your job.
Thank you. I know.
With consent of the council, and that's my opinion. I think putting all that pressure on you isn't fair either.
Well, I think that pressure goes with the CEO of the city. So whether it was the city manager in the past, that's who it laid with, and in this current form, the CEO being the mayor. So
If and when we have a city administrator, will that,
the mayor is still the
mayor
CEO,
would
but
be-
the mayor assigns them duties.
well, Don, with all respect to you, I still agree that the council needs to be involved in those decisions. I think it's responsibility of elected officials to do that.
At some point, I agree, but on the other hand,
I understand what you're saying, but
I get
that's,
it.
that's
On
one
the
of
other hand,
one of the issues.
the mayor
always.
works directly with the department heads. We don't. The mayor makes a decision on whether the department head is doing their job properly or not. We don't. Now, you can certainly go talk to the department head. You can get all the information you want from the department head. That doesn't mean that you know on a day-to-day basis what that department head is doing for the city. The mayor does. The mayor's supposed to know, okay? So I disagree with that.
One comment that I received from a citizen was that if the citizens as a whole aren't happy with how things are going, they can replace the mayor, who then has the responsibility to replace department heads as necessary to move things in the direction they would like to see. And if it takes the whole body to remove that person, it's harder to, you can replace the mayor 5 times and maybe not replace your department heads. Do you see what I'm saying? Their opinion was that it would be nice to, they liked the idea that they could replace the mayor if they weren't happy, and that mayor would then be able to replace department heads as necessary, rather than having to replace 8 council members to see the changes they wanted to see.
And
Just a thought. I mean,
just to add to that too, sorry, Mike. If I'm not mistaken, like governor chooses her cabinet, president chooses her cabinet, their cabinet. I shouldn't say her, sorry. That's like standard operating procedure in American government, it seems like, as well, just to add.
Mike, did you have something?
Down to the department head level, we're gonna go that far. The council determines who gets to stay and who gets to go to the department head level. I think that's wrong. Who would want to come to work when a vote of 5 can get any department head fired?
Welcome to other governmental agencies in our area. Visit Meade County. Really, it's a vote of 3. Doesn't seem like there's consensus, so in the order of moving, I mean,
Well,
indefinite term, I don't like, but let's continue to item C in the same chapter. 721C. Halfway down, we have city manager still in that about bonding. In D, there was a question about if a person incurs costs, why they can't be covered, but I think our employment policy covers those questions and, or those expenses. And the analogy I took was if we had a department head that was maybe on vacation somewhere and they had to be called back for some exceptional emergency, you know, I'm sure that we would cover their mileage. And I think that covers, it's spelled
So-
out in there enough
okay.
to.
So you're not looking to change
I'm not
that?
looking
Okay.
at change, just making a general comment about that. 722. Halfway down is a comment, the department heads are directly accountable to the mayor. We get that from state law, but elsewhere when it shows city administrator, that's not the chain of command. And so the question for me on how that is written is how does that work when we have employed a city administrator?
The city administrator is considered a department head.
So the city administrator would oversee nobody, even though when we get into the qualifications and whatnot, it says that they oversee those.
Well, I guess that would be,
I mean, and not to jump ahead, but 733B says the city administrator powers is overseeing and directing the administration of all departments, offices, and agencies of the city, except as otherwise provided by state law. So does state law mean that the city administrator doesn't oversee anyone and the mayor oversees everyone?
That's correct. The city administrator is not an office recognized by our state code.
Okay, that clarifies that for me. The final paragraph in 722 starts with the mayor with approval of council must establish by resolution a more precise organizational chart. I I'd like to see added to the front of that annually during the budget process. The mayor with approval of council must establish by resolution a more precise organizational chart. I've said that a bunch of times during these discussions. Council, through their legislative action, approves the budget that approves the positions. And it seems reasonable to me to approve the organizational chart as we approve the budget, because they're tied together in my, at least in my.
So you're contemplating that through the budget ordinance, you could discharge department heads who have been selected and approved by the mayor?
No, sir, that's not what I'm saying.
Sounded like it.
I think you're being a little insubordinate right now, so please stand down. I'm an elected official and you're the city employee in this action. I'm asking to approve positions that are funded through the budget.
May I, Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Marshall, I guess I'm not seeing what you were seeing.
You're taking the power of the purse and using it, weaponizing it to authorize the elimination of employees who have been appointed and approved by council, and to do that annually. It is fundamentally inconsistent with the idea that those people serve at the pleasure of the mayor.
To humor the discussion, Mayor, how is it when we approve the positions, we approve the budget, we could just not fund a position? I mean, it doesn't matter what position it is, but what we're doing is establishing what the chain of command is when we fund the budget, so that we know that we're funding 5 positions in the finance office, or 4 positions, or 3 positions, or whatever it might be, and what the makeup is, and it's locked in at that point so that it's tied to the budget ordinance. I don't see it being a way to weaponize against anyone. It's a way to communicate with the constituents of the community and for the council to fully understand the budget that they're voting on.
I guess part of what I see, I mean, and I get what you're saying, Kevin, it all ties in together, but does the org chart, I guess, does it belong in ordinance where if there were to be any changes, now this is an ordinance and you can't even remove someone from there? I guess, does it belong in ordinance? Or does
I don't
it belong
think it would
somewhere
be
else?
in the ordinance. It's just saying that the chart would be established in the budget process, not, it wouldn't be in the ordinance. The organizational chart wouldn't be in the ordinance. It's just saying,
Well, if
am I
there-
right there? Am I understanding that? It wouldn't be in the ordinance. It would be in the,
So how is it being approved then annually, I guess? A resolution, okay. Does anything with that, Mr. Marshall, contradict what our discussion was earlier than with the point that you were making? So does putting that in there contradict anything? Regarding the earlier, you might have to think about that, sorry.
I don't believe it's contradictory, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Was everyone, didn't hear much other comment other than Jesse, but was everyone in agreement with adding that about the org chart annually with the budget? Okay. What are we moving on to next?
Just a general question about item 723, general appeal procedures. This information spells out that the appeal goes to the finance officer. Would that appeal not go, I mean, that's a department head. Wouldn't the appeal be to the chief executive officer, the mayor? Or at least if it was a department, it would be the HR office?
Go ahead, Ms. Marshall. Is there any
Aye,
state
Madam
law?
Mayor.
Yes.
That appeal procedure is written in a way so that the finance officer serves the function of a clerk of courts, so that the appeal is filed with the clerk of courts, and in this ordinance, it's filed with the finance officer, thus triggering the procedure.
So it's just filed there. Okay. Does that make more sense?
That did help clarify it for me, but it's still, in future years, when you read that, making an appeal for a personnel item to the finance officer seems to be a stretch.
Is there any way we can reword that, word that differently to?
I think it's, may I, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
It's fundamentally a procedural item. If you're aggrieved, you file an appeal. The office then processes that appeal, and that is all that general appeal procedures is designed to do.
I mean, I guess for me, where it says filing a written notice of appeal with the finance officer, I mean, I guess that seems clear to me, but. Come on up, Bunny.
Why wouldn't that go through HR? I mean, I'm looking at life experience, and I understand what Mark is saying about the, simply a procedure, but why wouldn't a personnel issue like that go through HR? And I understand the discussion. I have worked on contract, and I worked year by year by year, and when moved across the country to do that, on each contract being 1 year at a time, and serving at the pleasure of my president, even though I had an intermediary supervisor, my contract was renewed at the pleasure of the president. So I'm kind of having trouble understanding why there's so much uncertainty about chain of command, but I think that you're right, Jesse, in that you're not saying that the org chart is sealed into the ordinance as what it should be, but the ordinance is asking for it to be reviewed, reconsidered, and kept fresh on an annual basis. And I think you're on the right track with that. But my question is, why wouldn't an employment issue go to HR?
To me, it seems like it should, but I guess I don't know why I don't know why it wouldn't.
May I point something out in the preceding sentence that says, excluding any employment dispute? This is a general appeals procedure that doesn't apply to employment disputes.
For example, give us an example.
Allegations of discrimination, allegations of abusive conduct, things that are not terms and conditions of employment, violations of city ordinance, council actions. This is a general appeal procedure for any time someone is aggrieved by an action of city government or by an action of city employee, excluding employment disputes. Employment disputes follow the HR path.
Where I've been, those went through HR as well. My experience.
I'm inclined to agree, only because if in fact what you're looking for is the clerk of courts analogy, that could be anyone. It's a starting point, and that might be better served with someone who deals with that as opposed to someone who deals more accurately with numbers, etc.
State law organizes city government around the concept that the finance office is the repository of all documents and is the repository of applications for licensure. And this simply puts it in one spot. If you're aggrieved by the conduct of any employee or by the city itself, you file your appeal. It is designed to be that clerk of courts analogy.
So may I ask then, and I see what you're saying, it really doesn't involve, for example, with Adam, it doesn't mean that Adam has to take action on it except he clears it.
That's correct. The rest of the ordinance says what the finance officer does. Sets a hearing, provides it to city council, notifies the parties of the time and place of the hearing.
Could I hate to disturb you, Lisa, but as HR, could you maybe give a professional opinion on why or why not this may be appropriate under HR? Sorry, were you? I know you were working back there.
I was listening.
This part, okay.
This, I mean, kind of to Mark's point, is really more of a where does it go type. You know, when someone complains, where does it go? Under state law, the claims, if you're putting a claim in against the city for negligence or for, you know, you damaged my mailbox or the city did something, those do go to the finance officer by law. So I think this is kind of mirroring that claim process that's already set up. I handle it on behalf of the city for like those claims that we put into our liability and property insurance, but they do actually go to the finance officer. I didn't answer your question, but
No. Does anyone have any questions for the HR?
So it's just a place to bring your complaint, and from there it goes to the appropriate
it gets routed.
direction.
It's
It
like
is.
going to the clerk of courts. It gets registered.
The other thing about doing it to the finance office is they staff it and they're there. Somebody's there all the time. I'm in and out of my office, and so catching me may be more difficult, whereas the finance office does have, a staff. And
Fully
so,
staffed
you're basically putting it to the finance office, and they would process it,
Thank you, Lisa. So is everyone good with that? Remaining with the finance office? Should it say file it with the finance office and not officer? Just throwing that out there. I don't know. Yeah. Would that make it a little clearer that you're leaving it with the department? I'm sorry, Mr. Marshall, does that complicate things or make things bad? I see you wincing.
I'm wincing for reasons unrelated to your comment.
Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Would that work, that if it just said finance office and not the finance officer?
Yes, that would work.
Okay. Would we want to change that to finance office then?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Okay. Right. Next, Kevin, you seem to be the one jumping right along, so we'll follow you.
Jumping on along, so chapter 373(1). The first sentence has different words in it. The mayor may appoint a city administrator with the consent of the city council. But in 721B, the mayor appoints each officer with the approval of city council. So, I mean, what's the difference in the word? Anything?
May I?
Yeah, legally.
None.
Okay. Do we
Would
just
it
want to
be
clean it
better
up?
if it was
and
consistent? Yes, but I did not review these prior ordinances for consistency. I reviewed them for substance.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate that. It's been a lot of work.
So approval seems to fit better. 731.
The first sentence.
Remove consent and replace it with approval.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes, Deb, that looks right.
This is clearly a cut and paste because you have the same problem. You have a period in the middle of the sentence and with it for an indefinite term of office hanging out at the end. It just needs to be rebuilt.
Thank you. And if this first reading passes, we'll clean this all up, and for second reading, as long as there's no substantial changes and we see everything that's cleaned up, second reading can still go through.
I guess that's my question, is at what point does this get cleaned up? Because we're seeing here the same misspelling, city administrator misspelled, qualifications misspelled. I mean, I would have thought, coming to a first reading, that there would have been a spell check and a grammar check.
This was a
on the-
little rushed with the
And I
week's
do-
notice,
I
since this
do
is a special
understand that.
meeting. Yeah.
And I don't want to keep picking at those little things if they're going to get taken care of, but if they're not going to get taken care of, we need to shine a light on them, so.
The second
Just
reading
coach
would be
me.
what goes into
Okay,
effect.
but my
so
experience on second readings has been, oh, well, we're to second reading, it's too late to make a change. So I don't want to hear that on second reading then. Can
Well,
I quote you?
It should be, well, I'm just saying that most of these changes should be done. I can't guarantee you that there won't be a period missed.
You are speaking into the recorder. Thank you, Angela.
I just have questions and clarification on 733, powers and duties of the city administrator. I think I agree with all of the powers. I wonder if it's kind of mostly a cut and paste from the city manager piece, but obviously this is pulled from other communities. But for me, is the question, since many of these duties listed A through N include making recommendations, being responsible for preparing and reporting to city council, is it prudent to have a change in the first sentence of that chapter? City administrator is the chief administrative officer of the city, responsible to the mayor and council for administration of all city affairs? Or is that against the state law?
I'm sorry, I missed the change you were looking to make.
Responsible to the mayor is how it reads. To the mayor and council.
I think that might be contrary to state law, Mr. Marshall.
The city if I may, Madam Mayor, the city administrator is a direct report to the mayor. So in general terms, it is a correct statement. In specific terms, it is a responsibility owed directly to the mayor.
that answer your question?
I assumed that that would be the answer, but I wanted to ask the question. Chapter 734, Acting City Administrator. Do we need that when we have the mayor? I mean, the mayor is over. So why do we need an acting city administrator? The mayor actually does that work in the absence.
So, Mr. Marshall, I guess, who would this be referring to, since it says that they must appoint? But it's obviously during their absence or disability, but it says that they must appoint someone. Is this not something that the mayor can take over then their duties? Or what is this?
We would, I think, Madam Mayor, that succession planning contemplates circumstances that may not be readily apparent. This looks to a situation where, like the one we're in, where there was no designee appointed to fill the city manager's job. And those duties devolved onto the mayor, perhaps unfairly. If you are without a city administrator for an extended period of time, you have a part-time mayor doing a full-time administrative job, and I don't think that is fair to either the city or to the chief executive officer who is tasked with those day-to-day responsibilities.
So if a city administrator quits, are they really expected to appoint someone when they're writing a letter quitting? I mean, and this says that they must appoint. I can't.
This section contemplates temporary absence or disability. It does not contemplate someone who terminates their employment.
Okay. Thank you.
Is this a case for May or must?
I don't know. How would May make a difference here?
May would cause the provision to be discretionary rather than mandatory.
So there would really be no point to it, to having it in here. Right.
If you want an acting city administrator, then you should, in my opinion, have a requirement that your city administrator appoint one for those circumstances in which the administrator is temporarily absent or disabled.
Did you have a big hang up on that one, Kevin?
I highlighted this one, pulled this one out today too, because it seems to me that given the absence or temporary disability of the city administrator, that those duties should fall to the mayor. It is temporary. And in looking at the existing Title VII, it looks like that's for more or less is a copy and paste of what was underneath the city manager position, which is a completely different job than the city administrator. I'm of the opinion and inclined to remove this section, and if the city administrator, for whatever reason, if there's a temporary absence or disability, then those responsibilities should fall to the mayor.
Madam Mayor, may I suggest an alternative? And that is to say that in the temporary absence or disability of a city administrator, the mayor may appoint an acting administrator with the consent of the council.
I like that.
Sure.
You can get it off
He'll
the
look through
recording,
it
Deb.
before second.
May I make a
Yeah.
personal point?
Yes.
Last Wednesday, I had a surgical procedure in which a nerve stimulator was wrapped around the muscle and nerve that controls my tongue. So the longer I speak, the more difficult it becomes for me to speak and to articulate. So that's a long way of saying, no, I don't want to say that over again because
In the absence of a city administrator, the mayor may appoint a
With the consent of council
designee
or approval.
with approval of council. Something close to that.
A designee to perform those
you have
duties.
captured the essence of it.
And we have done that,
May.
we have done that in the past. It simply falls to legal and, I'm sorry, not to legal and finance, but to our HR. Lisa ends up with a lot of authority through our ordinances because of the positions.
And just, if I may, again, Madam Mayor, for historical reference, that duty was given to the city manager to appoint a designee for that purpose, and was a mandatory requirement, and it was mandatory that it be done each year.
So that it would automatically go to someone. each time.
Correct.
Then do I take off this sentence?
Could we put designee or designees? Because in the last 2 times we've had a transition, we have actually appointed a team of people. So giving you that flexibility to appoint more than one to fulfill that duty.
Sure. Thanks for that, Lisa. Do you have in there with the approval of council? How's that look?
Take that second sentence out.
About the mayor revoking? I guess that's not necessary then, yeah. Unless they want to revoke their own designee.
Just a question on that. With what you just said, should there also be a date? So nobody has, so like if something happens, the person who's going to be appointed isn't surprised more than they already maybe would be. Like, say, what? The city administrator designates a emergency appointee or whatever. That September 1st falls in line with the budget, doesn't it?
I think budget's a little later, but
Well,
I
could
think
always
this would
do
be
like
something that they would do.
like May or June,
Say-
which would
Well, I guess, yeah.
Or
fall in line with the term of a mayor. So say if there's a new mayor coming on at the start of a term, so then maybe like first meeting in June if you wanted to go that route,
just a thought.
type of thing.
Just a thought.
Weren't we putting in the absence of the city administrator? So this wouldn't be a preemptive deal, it would be a reactionary thing?
Well, I think like Mark just said that it was for the city manager, like they had to appoint someone in case of an emergency, so there had to be someone like on the books, ready.
Yeah, but on the
Yeah.
books for mayor and councils, as we are now, is the mayor.
Oh, that's true,
We didn't have that
right?
chain of command with
So
city
the mayor has
administrator.
time, right? Because the mayor could just fill in until they,
The mayor would have signing authority and
Suppose on that end you could delegate as well.
A date certain wouldn't be appropriate anyway, because you don't know when it's going to happen. So you may talk about appointing a particular date, but I think the point of this is having a person available. And I think we've accomplished that.
good thought though, Nick. Right. Letting Kevin finish all of his, and then, because I doubt everyone else has as much, then we can kind of go back through, see if we missed anything. What else do you got?
hopefully we're, everybody going through. 1735. My only question would be is, as part of this ordinance, lots of department heads, is there some order of efficiency? For example, if Public Works Director is able to sign, you know, to be the countersigner for contracts involving their area. I mean, does it speed things up and make it more efficient for us? And I'm not proposing a language in that, but by making it only those two all the time, are we setting ourselves up in the absence of one of them to slow process? Example might be a construction easement or something, you know, something that we have to tied to a project.
Well, would that be a conflict then, and no real checks and balances if they're signing their own, something that they're involved with, their department?
Well, it says the mayor or city administrator. These others are just countersigning. I mean, they're not-
Right, but I'm saying that's why if like the Public Works Director were allowed to countersign one of his own
so
things
if
that
it-
he
It'd
presented.
be
it's
probably
just-
no different than if the finance officer signed a contract for his department.
Yeah, the audit
I don't know
contract,
that.
for example.
I think those contracts probably fewer and far in between then.
But they still, you know, they exist, so.
I don't know.
I'm not hung up on that, but it seems like there's
Just want more people available.
more people.
HR?
Pardon me?
HR?
Well, that would be fine. I mean,
Trying to
having
think
an
of contracts
extra
that, yeah.
secondary signature seems like a good efficiency piece. But two might be enough.
Or Director of Administrative Services is her technical title,
Correct.
so.
Simply as an observation, again, if I may, Madam Mayor, currently when we sign checks, they are signed by the city finance officer, and I have the co-signing authority. In practice, that is proven enough, but that's not any reason to keep that system in place. To necessarily recommend it, but that is what the current practice.
If we were down a finance officer and a city attorney, we'd be in trouble.
Countersign checks. I countersign checks every 2 weeks. All the time. As many as 120 twice a month, not every 2 weeks. So when you approve claims, those claims are paid by a check, and the check is signed by the finance officer, and I have authority to co-sign, as does the mayor. And I don't recall if there is a fourth person on the checking account for that purpose or not. But it functions well as it is.
I
I
don't
don't
think we
think it-
need another.
I don't think it would hurt.
Yeah, I guess I don't see, just to have it as an option.
Do you want to add like Director of Administrative Services?
Add Lisa, or Lisa's job title.
Okay.
I don't see
I
any
would-
reason why not.
As long as he's not signing his own and then countersigning his own.
Don't you remember
You can't sign and countersign, Rick.
his best friends call him Cash?
Oh. Okay.
We're not stuck on lots of spelling, but just to point out, 742, number 2, B2, 742, B2. Says the finance officer must be bonded. So I'm not sure which one of those actually applies, but I would assume it was must.
They kind of act the same in law, don't they? Shall and must.
In our ordinance, we have identified that must is used to indicate a mandatory obligation, and may is a discretionary function. I think it would be appropriate to strike the shall in that circumstance.
In that same chapter, 742, excuse me, it jumps here at the bottom, 743, Public Works Department. I'm not sure that it matters, but we talk about traffic, solid waste disposal. But in our Public Works Department, we truly have water, fleet, park, and cemetery as well. So I'm not sure if those adjectives there, or not adjectives, but those
Functions.
those items need to be adjusted. I mean, we don't have a traffic department.
743 where? You just put one-stop shop.
Yeah, 743 and check signer. 743A. Just seems like it would be more accurate to include our specific divisions under Public Works.
Is traffic maybe referring to like traffic lights, Rick, or? Okay.
Some places do actually have traffic divisions.
744.
What did you say they were, Kevin?
Pardon me?
Water, streets?
Water, fleet, park, and cemetery. And remove traffic and solid waste disposal. 744, Public Safety Departments. We've got a little numbering deal to just address there. We go to A and then A, B, and then AB again. That's an easy. But the reason that it became apparent because it was hard to look at when we go to 744B. It actually is below that. It starts with Department of Emergency. There you go. It calls it a department, but we have the list of departments here, and it's not a department looking at EMS. So I'm not sure what we need to do. Is that a division, or how do we correct the naming on that?
May I, Madam Mayor? In our current setup, it's my understanding that ambulance is a separate department. And this was designed to call the ambulance emergency medical services as a department under the public safety departments. So it was an attempt to set forth our current practice.
Yeah, I agree with it. I just,
Do we need to add it?
do we
then?
need to add anything else
beginning.
to make sure that we're clear with that? Are we good with?
I can, if I may again, offer this suggestion. I can take it out of a head, call it police department, and then a separate department as emergency medical services, so that there aren't two department heads combined under one heading of public safety departments. This also contemplates something that may happen in the future, and that concerns the volunteer fire department. Whether the federal regulations will compel the city to change that is something I don't know, but if that's the case, you know, you would have potentially have another department head there. Again, I'm happy to do whatever you would feel is more consistent with council's desires.
Myself, I like it under public safety, how it is. It's just, I was questioning whether or not we needed to make additional adjustments because it's listed as a department.
Is it more appropriate as a division?
That seems bigger than a department.
Right, yeah, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for.
We are looking for a word.
And the ambulance director is considered a department head. Chief is considered a department head. So
And if I may, it's an enterprise fund as well that isn't functioning very well as an enterprise fund because the revenue doesn't cover the expenses and it becomes a drain on the general fund. So there's a lot of stuff, for want of a better word, going on with ambulance.
Would it be better to just call the chapter 744 Public Safety Division? I mean, we've determined that division is above department. or his department's adequate, I'm okay to move on with it.
Well, I'd say she is a department head, so then I would just leave it as department.
Okay. 745, Community Center. They cover recreation buildings and the armory as well. Is there any edits that need to be added to that chapter?
I think number one would answer that, Kevin, underneath the B1. Other duties.
By the position job description?
Yeah.
I mean, that covers everything. It's just a matter of if you wanted to be more specific or not.
I myself don't have any other questions for several of them, but down at the legal department, 7410, this comes down to who are we able to work with as a council for legal representation. 7410B2 says duties and responsibilities. The city attorney is responsible for legal affairs of the city as provided by state law and this code, and such other duties which may be provided in the position job description. The city attorney may also perform such other duties as may be assigned by the mayor on such terms as may be agreed to by the mayor and the city attorney. Understand that state law says that staff reports to the mayor, but how is council supposed to have legal representation if they don't have some input on other duties?
I guess, can you give an example of what representation you think that council doesn't have, that if the city attorney is for the city, I guess I don't.
I can't necessarily come up with an exact example at this moment, but I feel that in the last 3 or 4 meetings, we've discussed this exact topic a few times. And so if we're going outside, these duties are items that are going outside of what shows in our code, our ordinances, our resolution, and the job description. You know, an example might be a fundamental change of how we do business in an enterprise fund or creating an enterprise fund.
So that's council representation. I mean, that just sounds like a normal question. I mean, that doesn't sound like really council not having representation.
Well, my question is council able to be involved in those outside of the norm decisions? Or are they able to be part of the approval process of these extra work items?
I mean, I guess I would just think that if it's something that major, as far as changing the whole function and the way something works, policies, even operations, that council would speak to the mayor and it would be something that's being discussed that then the city attorney just works on. So I don't know, Mr. Marshall, maybe you can say better what your function as a city attorney is and how council is or isn't receiving representation possibly.
I think, if I may, Madam Mayor, that the language that the city attorney is responsible for all the legal affairs of the city addresses that. If there is a legal affair that council wants addressed, council can make that request.
And I know it's been brought up a few times, Kevin, and that's why I asked, because I just don't really I guess I just didn't really understand the idea that council didn't have representation, and that's just why
Well, and I might have phrased that wrong, Mayor. It might be more of a, for lack of a better term, staying on task. An idea might be, being involved in the additional workloads so that we can make sure that the goals and priorities of the city are addressed first before we go spend time.
And so you think through the city attorney is the best way for that, or you think, I don't know.
I don't know. I'm trying to have the discussion.
I know, I'm not sure either. I just, as far as city attorney's duties, I don't know.
So can I add to that too? So to me, the language sounds limiting, and it's a bit, I don't understand why that specific language is specifically in here for the legal department, but is not tailored also for all the other ones, all the other department heads as well. Why wouldn't another department head have Public Works Director may also perform such other duties as may be assigned by the mayor on such terms as may be agreed to by the mayor and the Public Works Director. So it seems like the language comes across as limiting to our legal representation on council. It's the way it comes across. So I don't know if there's a better way that we can phrase it so that it's not coming across that way.
Sure, I know what you're saying.
'Cause why-
Mr. Marshall,
Why specifically phrase it like this for legal, but not for any other department head?
I'm wondering if it's because this is a contract employee generally. So if that's why it's different, I'm just throwing that out there. Is that why it's different than the other department heads?
May I respond, Madam Mayor? I think that this provision, having come from another city, reflects the experience of many cities across the nation where council have tasked the city attorney with a variety of work that is not something that the mayor wants the city attorney looking into, and that it results in a stack of duties that are not designed to further the city's objectives, but may be designed, and I'm not saying this is the case, please understand, this is in terms of other cities that I have looked at, where they want an initiative investigated, such as, how do we accommodate the needs of those in our community who suffer from substance abuses? City attorney, go figure that out. Or how do we accommodate homelessness? Those are tasks that I have seen given to the city attorney in other communities that take the city attorney's time away from the city attorney's core job responsibilities. And this language is an attempt to deal with that. And in that regard, the city attorney is different than a public works director because of the broad nature of the legal profession. It is often said, and rightfully so, that the city attorney is a jack of all trades and master of none. and that is the experience of many lawyers in South Dakota, where they are general practitioners who don't know an answer unless a question is asked of them, and they use their experience and training to bring back the answer.
Thank you.
So I guess why spell it out if council can't give an order to any city staff anyways? Right?
Was this something that you saw in other ordinances that we were referring to? Or kind of, it was a combination of them all?
It was a combination of them all.
Okay.
Doesn't sound like there's any consensus for. I appreciate all the budget items that were added, both by Eric and by you, Mark. I don't know which one of you to.
Thank you, Councilor Forrester. I have to give credit for that primarily to Eric.
I would have in 769, overspending of appropriations prohibited. Seems to be prudent to make sure that we define whether that's bottom line on the budget or line item. And myself as a person that expects responsibility to the line item, define that we don't end up charging supplies to subscriptions or fuel to repairs and maintenance, or et cetera, that we have that we're responsible to the line item. So I don't know if anybody else has any.
I think that certainly makes sense, especially moving into future years, looking at future budgets. It's I think if you maintain that line item or be true to the line item, it helps the budgeting process for future years.
So what exactly were you looking to change? Sorry, I got on the page a little late.
769, overspending of appropriations prohibited.
Right.
So, in a nutshell, are we talking about overspending an entire budget? For example, let's just pick on Adam, because he's sitting right here looking really good in his suit. He's got a budget that has a bottom line of X amount of dollars. And are we concerned with making sure that the addition of all the items, the line items, that he does not overspend the bottom line? Or are we interested in having discussion on making sure that individual line items are not exceeded?
I think that's definitely important. At the end of the day, I think that really limits and puts a strain on the department heads as they're just trying to function when you have something as specific as the line items in ordinance. So as far as the part that's actually in the ordinance, I would think that just in general, that overspending should be in there, yes. But for them to day to day be able to, oh my goodness, I need some pens, but I'm over my pen budget and I didn't spend, a lot here. I'm able to move something. So I think you really limit them if they can't even do something that's that small. And you put it into ordinance. I think that's something that can certainly be put in policy or someplace else. Rick, do you want to come speak to it? He's got a pretty big budget with small items that.
So where I would see this come into play would be, for example, year to year, I don't know what my salt budget is for snow removal, and I still maintain that line item, and I will show it as a negative number if I go over, if I have to go over. But what I may do is I may reduce gravel purchases, and we wouldn't buy as much gravel to offset that, and so I'm still, in supplies and materials, I'm still not over budget. In a particular line item, I may be over budget or overspent, but I'm still holding true, showing that it's a negative, because number one, I would use that for justification the following year to say, hey, council, I need $80,000 for this line item because I continually overspend it from year to year to year. I'm still holding it true, but you're not saying that I'm doing something illegal or I don't have to come to the council when I see that. And also, if we're doing monthly reporting, you're going to see that ahead of time anyways. You're going to see that, hey, we're 3 months into the year and you've spent 80% of this line item already. Are you going to make it? And again, my response back may be, you know what, we are going to go over that line item budget, but I can make it up here so that and I'm not talking about my entire budget, I'm talking about the supplies and materials. Same thing with if I end up having a unexpected repair, I may be able to move things around in that line item, in that repair line item, so that I don't need an appropriation. I think you need to give the department heads, I mean, number one, you trust me with 7 different budgets that, I mean, you got to give me a little bit of latitude to make that work and not need an appropriation.
I think maybe the more important thing would be accurate reporting, right? Like you said,
Right.
showing a negative in that line item.
And
So
I don't
that we
see any
can-
reason why anybody wouldn't do that. Again, it gives justification to ask for more in subsequent years if we're not able to cover it. So to try and hide it. But what I'm saying is I don't think from day-to-day operational, for me to have to come back and not be able to order that next semi-load of this material because I haven't came and got the council's authorization to do that, I think ties our hands up a little bit.
Thank you for stating it that way, Rick. I believe that actually to be true, that, a good department head should be able to manage their budget while being responsible to the line item, because, we don't want to see you moving it around, and by going to individual line items, it might in some cases, I'm not trying to accuse anybody, but it might promote not being responsible to the line item.
Sure, and I think everybody would have to answer that question. At the end of the day, you're gonna ask me, why are we over? I'm gonna be able to articulate why.
Exactly.
And if I can't, then that's when you hold me accountable.
Yeah, so for me, making sure that we determine that the overspending is by the bottom line of the budget, but we have a department head has a responsibility to maintain the line item expenditures. How would we articulate that? Reporting. Accountability or categorization or?
Accurate, I don't know.
And typically, those would be, at my level, those would be conversations that now I would be having with the mayor. Before I would have with the city manager, I'd be like, hey, the transmission blew up in the garbage truck. It wasn't a budgeted expense. I think I can fix it. And what we won't do is we won't do as much X, Y, and Z here. And I think I can still maintain my budget without having to have an appropriation.
As a business owner, I absolutely agree with that. I'd like to know the bottom line was being maintained, but what you've said is to keep track of the others so that you have a chance next year to be a little more accurate.
Right.
But I think, I guess I wouldn't be as interested in being so picky on the smaller things, the line items within that total budget, as long as the budget's being maintained.
But make sure that we put every expenditure in the right category.
Thank
I
you.
can tell you that there's many times when you're going through expenditures and you're trying to figure out where you're gonna put them, and I always hope I had a miscellaneous column somewhere.
So is there just a way to, not saying they can't go over budget on per line item, as Rick said, but just a way to make sure the accounting of it is accurate?
And that was the point that I wanted to make with reference to where we've been historically, is that we've had inaccuracies, we've had errors in how things were coded, and I think what we're looking for is accuracy in those line items. I just can't imagine, I think to make an absolute tie line item by line item is micromanaging, and you have really fine, capable people doing these jobs, and I just can't imagine from outside trying to tell Rick how much salt and Sandy can have. I mean, that's just unpredictable in our country, but I think historically our issue has been accuracy, and I think, Angela, you were right in that little brief reference to the expectation on department heads to do that, to keep those things in balance and be accurate and responsible to the line items, not tied to the line items, belong someplace else in policy and expectation, in professional development and training. Just that this is the way we do it here. I think that's the better place for it. It doesn't belong in an ordinance to be drugged by the line item.
So do we need to add something that says bottom line and accountability to line item accuracy?
Reporting accuracy, maybe, something along those lines?
I think I know what Kevin is trying to say, but again, I think the bottom line of that is the most important thing, and where someone puts something, even if they have to play fast and loose with facts in order to, if they're going to spend the same amount of money, the key to it is, as you indicated earlier, how do we budget next year if we don't have an understanding of how we spent it this year? So there needs to be a truthfulness within the department.
Well, like Rick said.
Yeah, exactly.
You show a negative, don't put the overage on salt under the gravel line item. Show the salt as a negative and the gravel as a.
But I wouldn't want to put that into where they somehow are penalized.
No, just.
And I think that's what you're saying too. But the bottom line, we have a budget. We try to keep that budget fair, and no offense, Kevin, but I think that's for bean counters. That's what we used to say. And again, I'm not being critical. I'm just saying, as a businessman, as an owner, managing that, I was responsible for the bottom line, making sure that bills are paid and everything is handled. I was less concerned about whether it was pens or
I think what Kevin's
paper
saying
clips.
is be tied to the bottom line,
Yes.
but accurate in the reporting to the line item.
That's fair.
That's my statement. Thank you, Jesse.
Does,
It's not a need, it's a will.
I was going to say, is there really anything?
Lived with the
May I, Madam?
In reading this paragraph, then, really, is there anything that needs to be changed? And yes, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, what I'm hearing is an expectation that the department heads will accurately account for each line item in their budget and not overspend the total budget amount.
So are you saying you can add that verbiage in there?
Something like that.
Okay. Okay. Did you get that, Deb?
I would say budget and not account is the only difference that I would suggest to what you've written.
Then you can take in their budget out up above. Account for each line item and not overspend their budget. And this on it, since you're talking about multiples.
Right.
Thank you.
You got anything else?
I certainly got a couple left. 7610, financial reporting. It's listed as quarterly. Our other governmental agencies in the area, I like the school district's monthly reporting. Their director of that, Brett Burdett, does a great job of providing a monthly report, and it comes straight out of their financial system. The county does some versions of that, comes straight out of their financial system, and it's not overly burdensome. It's just a report that they run, and good modern financial systems, they can actually tell the system to run on a certain day and email it to these people. So I'm sure that that this won't be a big deal for us to actually be able to update monthly. And to me, knowing the burn rate and the collection rate on revenue, burn rate on expenses and collection rate on revenue, sets our position, sets our expectations as the approvers of the budget to understand where we're at on that. Because further down, we talk about adjusting budgets and whatnot, and some of those are through supplements and additional appropriations, and sometimes there could be a case where, there's different actions, and again, different chapters in this play that out, but for me, monthly reporting rather than quarterly is paramount. I mean, it's just an item that goes either on the web page or in our packet. I would prefer to see it on the web page myself, but
I agree. I did some research. I think, like, if memory serves correctly, almost every community around us, even class 2s, do a monthly. I think other than Rapid. I think Rapid's annual, but I think everybody else is monthly.
How do you see that, Adam? How do you see that? Is that as easy as it sounds?
Yeah, I mean, we can create those reports. That's all doable. As I said, right now, I just need to catch up on my bank rec, and then we can do, we could do monthly.
Thank you.
It would certainly be helpful.
I think some clarification in 7611, the inventory records.
Before you go on, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Financial reporting, why is that an expectation on the mayor, and then you just turned around and said, Adam, can you do that? So why is that piece directed that the mayor will report when it's actually in Adam's control?
Because technically the mayor oversees all the operations, but Adam would actually be the one working on it, but I would be held accountable to make sure that he's doing it.
So does there need to be something a little more definitive in there that helps you do that? I mean, that's been, historically, getting access to that information has been difficult. Kevin's been asking those questions for a long time. So I would ask if this doesn't need to be a little bit more definitive of that trail of access. And then as that paragraph reads down, the council has had requests, the council has had interests on that. So I just, thinking of the experience we've had, the frustrations that we've had, that y'all have been through, I just question that doesn't need a little massaging there in that financial reporting piece.
I mean, I think to be consistent with everything, it would probably either have to be the mayor or city administrator listed there. Would that make sense? I don't know that we listed any other specific department heads.
If I may,
Yes.
I think that as written, this reflects the allocation of responsibilities and duties, that it is ultimately the mayor's responsibility to see that the finance officer provides the reports that council believes it needs to conduct council's business. So from my standpoint, I'm comfortable with that language as it reflects the current and anticipated chain of command.
So just changing to monthly instead of quarterly, and everything else is good?
Thanks for trying to help me, Bonnie.
A little clarification in maintenance of inventory records, 7611. To me, I think that inventory is capital assets. I mean, are we really looking for how many cases of paper that somebody might have in their supply closet? Or how many gallons of motor oil Rick has in his maintenance shop? I don't think so. I think using the same reporting that our counties use, where we have to, by the end of January, provide a list of capital assets, one list, anything over $1,000. But I actually, I've been out of that for a little bit, but I thought that actually went to even a higher number recently, to where it was closer to $3,000 or $5,000, but I don't know right off. So that you're capturing our titled items, our big ticket items. I mean, we could go down a rabbit hole, and this could be quite a hard thing to accomplish. And this inventory list also then gives Lisa a very good hand up on insuring everything, right? She's handling our insurance pieces, and so making sure that those expenditures that were made here and there, these items that we bought that were insurable items, are covered under our policy. I mean, I think it streamlines other departments' processes as well. So I think maybe capital assets is the way to put that inventory. An inventory of capital assets appropriate to each department be maintained and delivered by the end of January each year.
The $1,000 or more sounds good too.
I think I'd raise it a little bit. $1,000 today is, and I don't know what number you raise that to. 2,000, 3,000. It just
Do the
seems.
department heads have any recommendations on
In some of
some
these
of their
departments,
inventory?
5,000 is probably more notable.
I would go 5.
On what that number might be for you, Rick?
I mean, again, even for me, Public Works, you know how many $5,000 parts I have out at that wastewater treatment plant?
Hundreds.
Right. And are you looking at an inventory with serial numbers and manufacturers, and again, some departments it's not going to hit as hard. Again, I got 7 divisions, and so even at a $5,000 limit, there's a lot of, I mean, we have a lot of $5,000 parts. I mean, considering look at a set of tires is gonna be, for a garbage truck's over $5,000, and you've got, you've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 of them on every truck.
Those are consumables, so that wouldn't be in my mind, a piece that.
I mean, again, what are you asking? I think there's gotta be some clear language on what you're asking to maintain a record of. Is it items that are in inventory, or is it all items that are in use? Like I said, is it every pump that's in use on the wastewater plant, or is it what we have on the shelf in case one goes down?
I would think what's on the shelf.
Yeah, I would
Is
say
that-
shelf.
Or is it I mean, I guess.
Let me see if I can find what SDCL says about,
I mean, that would be my only concern.
Would added language like just asking subject to department be, because I mean, Rick has a point. If he has to inventory a garbage truck that's $100,000 or whatever, and like Lisa has whatever that's 1,000, that's a big difference.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
how much does our insurance company cover? And what do they require for their inventory in order to cover it?
Lisa is the guru on that. Thanks, Lisa.
So in general, we have a schedule of property that's covered. So that's going to include your vehicles, your buildings, and equipment. It will also have some unscheduled property, kind of a catch-all, up to $2,500 on unlisted or unscheduled items. So it's going to pick up things from picnic tables. It's going to pick up, your garbage trucks. So the inventory list that I've worked with over the years to develop with the department heads is kind of the master list that we do for insurance. If it's not scheduled, then if something happens, we would have issues.
So if Rick had a fire and some of those pumps were destroyed, is that going to be covered?
Yes, because we at each property have like a building's contents. And so we've made sure that the amount of contents in the building, which would include those kind of supplies on the shelves, would be covered.
So does the insurance company require that everything that's attached to a wall be like a desk that's attached and not that desk?
So they consider property, if you were to like pick the building up and shake it, whatever falls out, that's going to be your contents. Whatever is stuck on the building, so like the cameras and the closed circuit cameras and things like that would be part of like the building, but the contents would be the desks and that kind of stuff. Computers would be a content.
So do you get a list from all the department heads regarding what they have?
We work with them on value. So I will send them the value and say, hey, here's what we have for contents. Is that appropriate? And then they will go look at their inventory and say, yeah, or we need to adjust it up or down depending on what's actually in those buildings.
They don't have to list each item.
No, we do not, no.
But you say we kind of tentative have a,
We do on some things, so we will insure specific things specifically, but the catch-all, like the desks and the computers, are not listed. They're not scheduled, but we do have some things that are scheduled.
Are the police radios inventoried?
Yes, Jody has a list of those.
The portables as well?
Mm-hmm. Correct, Jody? You have a list of the portable radios, yeah?
Thank you.
Questions on?
Thanks, Lisa.
yeah. Well, just wondering, so is there no need for additional clarification in what's written there? Because it looks inventory appropriate to each department. Are we covered there?
I think so.
All right. I know you've all been waiting for this, but the last item might be an addition. I've discussed for quite a while a fee schedule that lists all of our fees published on our website. So no matter what it is, a citizen, a counselor, a staff member can go see what it costs, whether it be our base water fee, additional garbage tote dump fee, a building permit fee, a vendor permit for the rally, you know, any piece.
I think our building department has a fee schedule.
Yeah, there's fee schedules all over, but you have to go hunt to find each individual one.
You'd like them consolidated into
A
one.
lot of communities in the area, and personally, it's easy to find. I really like Deadwood's. It tells you how much it costs for a parking ticket. It tells you how much it costs. Any fee that the community collects is on that sheet.
So you'd like it streamlined into one location?
An easily accessible location.
And just like have the ordinance say that a fee schedule will be maintained and posted somewhere.
Posted on the webpage would be great, I think.
Yeah.
Were you looking for language that it would be like updated or something annually, or?
Well, it would
just-
have to be updated.
Well, I guess
as
if it's
fee
being
sketch.
maintained,
Yeah, it'd be
yeah.
maintained.
Guess that implies it.
If I may, Madam Mayor,
Yes.
that is another item that I would suggest be maintained in the finance office and be available to the public through the finance office as well as on the city website.
Yes. Great. Thank you.
Not to drag out the discussion on it, but it looks like it's maintained in the finance office as well, using Deadwood. Business licenses, police department, police reports, impound fees, animal licenses, golf cart fees, taxi licenses, planning and zoning, vending, building contractor fees, and it goes on and on.
All right. You got it.
Pardon me?
Where would you put that?
On the webpage?
I just tossed it on the end. Are you talking about?
Oh, as far as structure?
As far as this document goes, will you put?
7612, maybe. And with that,
Okay.
I'll shut up.
All right. Was there anything that we missed or went by too fast that someone else had a comment on? Maybe didn't get a chance to. Sure.
I have trouble keeping straight in my head things that fall into ordinances, things that fall into resolutions. And on the top of page 83 of 85, it's part of 70609. And then it says, it starts at the top, except where prohibited. This isn't a Louisa May Alcott sentence, it's 5 lines long. But at the end of it, it says, but only if such action is made or approved by ordinance. What would be an ordinance? I guess an action, it seemed to me like an action that would come out of this would be more a resolution than an ordinance. I mean, ordinances have a pretty long shelf life, and resolutions are sort of current events. Can you straighten me out on that?
Sorry, I'm reading your long sentence here, Bonnie.
Yeah, it's about making payments on contracts and
Under the
beyond the end of the fiscal
overspending.
year.
Yeah.
So aren't those resolutions, when something has to be held over like that, isn't that a resolution, not an ordinance?
A resolution is a temporary. Thing.
Most resolutions are annual. 1 year.
Okay. So this is referring to when you have a major project that's not finishing itself within its budget year, and so the payment for it's going to be extended over. When you take a stand on that, is that a resolution or is that an ordinance? I mean, ordinances are kind of forever until you change them. Mark? Help?
This is,
Ordinance.
if I may, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Language from another jurisdiction, and as I read this language, it contemplates approving long-term improvement contracts, as an example, by ordinance. So they would extend beyond a single fiscal year for the council.
So an ordinance says you can do that, but when it's actually happening, isn't that a resolution?
If you have a project that will take 5 years, just as an example, that would be easily done by an ordinance saying that we are going to build this project. It's going to take this long, cost this much money. We approve the project. I think that is cumbersome. I think it's more streamlined to approve those projects by a continuing resolution. And resolutions are presumed to be continuing unless they are stated to be annual. So again, for that big construction project, you authorize the mayor to sign it, and you authorize the payment of the contract to extend for the life of the contract within the resolution and not by ordinance. And that way you don't need to do the 2 readings of the ordinance, and you can just do it more efficiently, but no less accurately by resolution.
So you got it right that time.
Yes.
To follow up with that, Mark, is that how governing board would work with that, with the state law that says that without appropriations you can't sign a contract? So in other words, going from year to year?
That, I believe that continuing resolution would satisfy that state law.
The key being continuing resolution.
Yes. So you make the resolution for the life of your contract as extended. So if you have a change order, for example, that would require more expenditures and a longer period of time to perform the contract, that would be covered in the continuing resolution authorizing it. And I think back to the resolution or how the city built its wastewater treatment plant. That was a huge project, took a long time to do, ran over several sessions of council. And it could be, and probably was, I wasn't here when it was started, handled in that way. But that's language we can fix.
So as far as this sentence that Bonnie's referring to, does it make
I would change the last word to say,
to resolution?
unless approved by council action. That gives you the option to do it by resolution or by ordinance, depending on circumstances that may not be apparent right now.
How's that sound? Make more sense?
Okay, can we go to 70605? Amendments after adoption, ABC down to C. Oh, page 108 of 112 or 81 of 85?
The reduction of appropriations?
Yeah,
Okay.
read through that, and when you get down to the bottom, it looks like the mayor is able to take an action without council input with regard to changing the appropriation. Just read that one and see if you can get a feel for what seems like a problem. It's like the mayor takes an action, then reports to the council, and then they see what else they need to do. And it just seemed odd to me that an action that significant could be taken without council input. And is
May I,
there
Madam?
something in codified law that gives the mayor the authority to act on that? And what might that be?
Yes, Marshall.
An example of something like that, and this is relatively minor, if you are facing an overdraft charge or a late fee that is day by day, we give the mayor the authority to pay that account and report the situation back to council and make recommendations to address it. I think it's an emergency provision that would rarely be used, but may help you manage crises.
So it seems misnamed as a reduction of appropriations. I mean, it's an authority to act, stop the bleeding, whatever. Reduction of appropriations doesn't seem like an appropriate descriptor there.
I'd agree with that, but at the same time, I disown responsibility for drafting.
Well, we're in it together.
Mr. Marshall, is there a better way we could describe that?
Perhaps emergency expenditures, minor emergency expenditures.
I like that.
Even qualify it with a dollar limit to how much one is willing to authorize the mayor to spend without a specific appropriation to address an emergency. And it falls into the category of addressing situations that are currently unknown and may never happen.
So would an appropriate dollar amount be $1,000, $500? I don't.
If I may, I think the appropriate amount would be whatever council determines an appropriate amount to be.
Rick,
It depends on the emergency.
how far will $10,000 take you?
In an emergency.
About it.
But if it's a stopgap measure.
Well, as Mark indicated, this is for minor issues, not.
Yes, Lisa.
Major. Yeah.
We also, back in 2011 and 12, did have a reduction in appropriation. So basically, the council had made a budget, and the city manager basically said, you must all cut a percentage, 5%. And so that's how, when I read it, it was that process where, in this case, the mayor could come in and say, hey, we're not going to make our revenue goals. We need to all department heads need to cut by 5%, 3%, whatever that number is. That's giving her that authority to do that as well. And so that was a situation we had about 10 or 11 years ago.
I-
It did not rise to the level of council actually adopting a new budget. It was just that expectation was set. So
But
That
shouldn't a shift like
explanation,
that,
I'm
excuse me.
sorry,
Go ahead, Mark.
was not one within my contemplation. I was not around, and under those circumstances, reduction of appropriation seems to make sense.
If you're considering that, right?
Does that put council in a box as far as, I mean, through Robert's rules, we're able to revisit the budget ordinance?
But it seems like something like that should come from the council, not one individual making a sweeping, every department steps back 5%. I mean, that might not be appropriate for,
Well, we already within the ordinance specify that the budget is managed by the city administrator or the mayor. So if they, through the management of that piece, they say you need to cut your budget 5%, that's already covered, isn't it? I mean, so I like the idea when it went to the direction of changing it to emergency. But if it says reduction of appropriations,
so is that covered someplace else then, that?
well, the council has the ability to revisit any ordinance or resolution.
I go back to the thinking that we have and communication with the community. In that sense that we elected a council to use their good judgment to make decisions, and we think those things will be done by a council, not by an individual. So that's my thinking. But I like the minor emergency expenditure coverage on that Mark came up with. That seemed appropriate.
Maybe it needs to be a separate, this is a reduction, not an addition to the budget. This paragraph C is a reduction.
Do we add an emergency thing then too?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Do we need to add an emergency?
I think it would be fair.
Why use a scalpel when a chainsaw will work? You have the ability to call a special meeting on very short notice to address significant budget issues. With that ability, I'm not sure there's a need for this provision at all.
Well, I think that's important, and that's why we have the conversation. That's what kneading the bread is about, is figuring out what's already covered where, what might need a tweak, or what, hey, we've got it covered under this umbrella. We don't need to think about it until it happens. I appreciate that.
Striking that?
Thoughts on-
I think it could be, we can take care of that with an emergency or a special meeting, right? Huh?
Less is more. Right. Any other comments, questions, changes? And I'll say from the public or council. Well, as
Did-
far as,
Sorry, something I was thinking about on contracts. Would it be on certain contracts beneficial to have an escape clause baked in on certain things? An escape clause.
are you,
I think you'll have to give an example, Nick.
yeah,
All of our internal TIF funds.
Mark, isn't it general practice to include non-appropriations clauses in some contracts?
That is a general practice in some areas, you are correct.
Municipal government?
Yes.
Yeah. I think county government as well. I mean, I know that was a practice at Meade County.
And it is, in my opinion, more appropriate to address those circumstances case by case in the contract, recognizing you have that ability anytime you enter into an agreement. And by the same token, to adjust the default clauses and define what is a default, what is an act of God, what is force majeure, as lawyers like to say when they want to be fancy. So I think it's a matter of individual drafting more than anything else.
Okay, so this is, oh, yes, come on out, sir.
I would like to make a comment on the reduction of appropriations. My experience has been when no one is assigned the responsibility and there's a whole bunch of people, no one is responsible. This budget amendment made the mayor responsible to bring it to the council and recommend an action. So I think it's important to have that in there, leave it in there and not strike it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dale.
Because it does say in there that
I guess, I mean, he makes a good point. It doesn't hurt anything to have it in there.
Nope,
So
agreed.
maybe we just go back to
What it was?
what it was.
changing the name or leaving it as
I think leaving it as,
reduction of appropriations. Because it does state that the mayor must report to the city council without delay any deficiencies, so. Y'all like it? We'll put it back in there, the way it was. No changes to it. Okay. All right, thank you for that. All right. Did you get that, Deb? Okay. So this is supposed to be first reading, and a number of changes. As far as if there's a motion, yes,
May I
Mr.
make
Marshall.
a comment before you entertain a motion? And my comment would be that none of these changes are so substantial as to require an additional first reading.
So if someone were to make a motion, is just saying with all the discussed changes good enough?
In my opinion, the council has provided excellent direction as to how they want the ordinances shaped, and I believe such a motion would be in order, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Made it easy on you guys. So, is there a motion?
Mayor, I'd make a motion that we approve first reading of ordinance 2024-06 to amend and restate Title VII with the additions and edits discussed at the meeting tonight.
And I'll second.
Okay, so that was a first by Kevin and a second by Jim. Are we missing, we have two ordinance numbers in 11.2 though, because we had the
Well, that's for
Title
Title
Seven
The
and
second
Title
one is
One.
for Title One, correct?
yes. Do you want to put both in your motion or?
Yeah, I would amend my motion to include first reading of ordinance 2024-06, 2024-07, with the edits and additions as discussed tonight.
And Jim? Okay. Thank you. What's that? Okay. All right, there's a first and a second on the floor. First by Kevin, second by Jim, to approve the first readings of ordinance 2024-06 and 2024-07 with all the discussed changes. Any further discussion? Questions, comments, anything from the public? Okay, I'll go ahead and roll call this since it's an ordinance. Tony,
Yes.
Jesse,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Ruth,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Don,
No.
Jim,
Yes.
and Nick.
Yes.
Okay, so that was 7 yeses and 1 no. And that first reading passes. That brings us to our last agenda item, which would be to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'd move to adjourn.
First by Nick,
Second.
second by Jesse. All those in favor of adjourning, please indicate by stating yes.
Yes.
Those opposed with a no. All right, we're adjourned at 10:02.